Hi, I'm Chris. Today we're going to be talking about bread. Bread is a complex food system. Its basic ingredients working together, all with different functions. Even though bread is something we take for granted every day, it's an amazing harmony of its ingredients working together. There are four main ingredients in bread. The first is salt. Salt will help improve the taste and improve the dough handling, making it easier to knead and less sticky. It also serves a very important function of lowering the water activity. Water activity is a measurement of how available water is. So if the water activity is lower, the more controlled the fermentation will be because the water is less available to the yeast. This will cause our bread to rise evenly. Next important ingredient is the yeast. The yeast will take the available sugar, hexoses, and convert it to ethanol and CO2. Unfortunately, the ethanol will be burned off in the oven, but the CO2 is what causes the dough to rise. Next important ingredient is water. Water will disperse the ingredients and of course help us mix them. But it serves the very crucial function of hydrating the insoluble protein in the flour, making gluten. As we knead the dough, more gluten is made or developed, and you'll notice that the dough becomes more and more elastic. This is the gluten developing. Developed gluten makes the framework of the bread, and is what allows the bread to keep its shape and size, even though the yeast is done fermenting and there's no more CO2 production. The final ingredient is flour. Flour is the chief ingredient in any bread, and it's so important because it provides all the insoluble protein that will become the gluten. So I'm kneading the dough. I've already mixed all the ingredients, but actually I've decided to use an all-gluten flour. Now you typically never do this when you're baking. Normally you would use a very small amount of this if you use any at all. But I just wanted to have a little fun, and we'll see what happens when you put an extra amount of gluten in, just to see exactly how this ingredient works. It has made this dough extremely difficult to knead, and it is very elastic, which you can see. I'm pulling pretty hard, and I can barely pull it apart right now. Okay, so we baked the dough for about 35 minutes at 110 degrees Fahrenheit, and you can see the yeast has just begun to ferment slightly. This dough ball is probably 2 or 3 times bigger than it was before. But since we used the gluten, it's still very, very spongy. I'm going to knead the dough as best I can, although it will be difficult because it'll get really elastic, to evenly disperse all the CO2 and make my final bread product more even. I have to knead extra hard because of all the gluten in the dough. Here we are about 5/6 of the way through the baking time. As you can see, the loaf is a little goofy looking, and that's because we used a high gluten dough. It has a lot more of this elastic property that just allows the dough to get bigger and bigger as more and more CO2 is produced. And so right now, the starch is gelatinized and the gluten is pretty much set. I was hoping this dough would actually get a little bit bigger, more like a basketball, but there's still some time left, we'll see. As you can see, it's starting to get very brown on the outside. Some of that is due to burning just because we've kind of taken a weird method of baking this bread. But also we have Maillard browning occurring, and that's when amino acids mix with sugar and heat, and that creates the browning and some caramel-like flavors that you might notice in the crust of a normal bread. The Maillard browning is enhanced because we use milk in this bread, like you do in a lot of breads, and the lactose, which is sugar in the milk, isn't available for the yeast to ferment. So there's more sugar available in this bread than, say, if we hadn't used milk. Okay, so as you see, I've just taken this out. Definitely got a little burnt. But as you can see, it just completely escaped the pan. I mean, most bread would have fit nicely into the pan, and here we just have a giant loaf of bread. So this is what happens when you make bread with gluten flour. Thanks for watching. I hope you gained some knowledge about bread. Since the gluten makes it too difficult to chew, gotta find some other use for it.